Well, just to say formally, thanks so much, Caroline, for putting aside the time to talk to us today. If I could start just by asking you a little bit about how you did get into research and your sort of story as far as finding research, what you did, and then finding the ICG was.
Okay, well, research came into my life as a substitution, I think it was. I always wanted to be a journalist when I was younger. And then I didn't come, I came from a working class background. So when I went to the journalist recruitment process in France, I just didn't get through because I didn't have the support, the social support, I would say, that you would need initially. And so when I arrived in the UK with my, who then became my first husband, that was about 21, 22. I kind of applied for jobs because I was going to settle down here, and I had all sorts of different jobs. I had an offer working on visas at the French consulate, which my parents thought was really good. You know, it's like a fantastic opportunity to be a civil servant, perfect, you know. And I remember going for the day and then turning them down after a day and talking to my husband at the time. I was thinking, oh, I can't do this. I just can't do this. So I kind of looked around, applied for lots of different jobs, and then I went to a French. It's like a cultural center. And I walked past it a few weeks ago, actually, and remembered. It's like Charles Péguy something, you know. It's like a cultural center, and they had a little note from someone, a research director, looking for support in French for interviews run with doctors in France. So that's how I went into pharmaceutical research, did some freelance work, analyzing interviews, didn't really understand research at the time, learned everything on the job, literally. Learned everything on the job, and start working for ICIS Research, as what was called ICIS Research at the time, in a boathouse by the Thames in Putney, which I did for a couple of years, and then moved to Millward Brown, and then it kept going on, you know, looking at Europe and then communications, advertising, and just started from there. And I think what got me into it is my passion for understanding. So I did a degree in psychology later on in life, and because I work with psychologists, I work with Mary Goodyear, I worked with Alan Branthwaite. They were all coming from psychology at the time. I didn't realize the blessing actually of working with people like that. And then I did a degree in psychology when my son was born, and then kind of matched what I'd learned in research and where psychology kind of fitted in. But also I mostly got in because of languages. I'm half French, half German, and I had Spanish at the time. So I came with 3 languages. And that's really why because of the French to start with, to help this French director. And then when I worked with Alan Branthwaite at Millward Brown, it was mostly German and Spanish they were interested in. Not that I used them that much, but it really helped in terms of cross-cultural understanding. This is what I became specialized in, is understanding cultures, because I had a lot of experience of a lot of different places in the world.
Right, that's interesting, because psychology isn't normally the kind of focus or degree that would lead you to focus on the cultural differences. Is it?
So I did social psychology in particular. I mean, I'm
Right.
more of a social psychologist from my perspective. So that's the aspect that I was interested in, really. And that's been quite invaluable for models and designing. That's what I learned from Mary Goodyear. It's just, there's always a model.
Yes, yeah.
But, you know, understanding social psychology and psychology in general is quite helpful. You know.
Brilliant. That's so interesting. And then you set up your own agency and you discovered the ICG. How did that happen?
So I was made redundant. I joined What If, which is a big innovation company at the time, was only like starting really, and it didn't work out, and I was made redundant quite unexpectedly. So I decided, and my son was turning 4, was going to start had gone through preschool and going to start primary school. And I thought, how am I going to be a mum? And I said, might be the only child I ever have. And I'm not here because I'm traveling around the world constantly, you know, and I always had a week at home. So I kind of managed it quite well. But I was thinking, how do I do this? How do I continue to do this if he's going to go to school from 9 to 3? You
Yeah.
know, so I said to my husband, I'm just going to freelance. I'm just going to tell people I'm not going back to another job interview. I'm done with that, you know. And I've been working in agencies for about 13 years by then, and which felt a bit like slavery, I'll be honest with you, when I look back. And then I just started telling people that I was around. So MBL, Mary Goodyear's company, I couldn't continue working with them because they'd moved. Gave me some few jobs, and then within 6 months I won my first contract for Walt Disney World, which had been recommended to me through recruitment. You know, it's really interesting how things come in, and they became my biggest clients for about 12 years, where I worked for all the Disney companies in France, Disneyland Paris, Florida, not so much Los Angeles actually, and UK. So quite a lot of really a big bulk of my business over the years came then from Disney, and it started within the first 6 months. Because I started on my own, I never wanted to grow. So I run large projects in collaboration with others. That's where someone like Paul would come in, you know, for different things. I felt, especially at the end of the first year, that there was no need to celebrate. It's like, oh, I've done my first year on my own. It's extraordinary what's happened. It was quite stressful, full of uncertainty and all the rest. But you know, there's a cause to celebrate. No one to go to for Christmas dinner or Christmas celebration. So when the ICG, and I can't remember when it came up, but I've always been a networker, something I never really understood about myself for many years. That's what I'm just a social networker. So it must have come up in my radar because I would be searching. I'm constantly searching actually for connections as a person, I know now. And when it came up, I was seeking companionship in some form, even if it was distant, you know, a place to share, people like me, independence. I really liked the fact that there were people who were independent. And then when the e-group started, that was mesmerizing because I saw it taking off, and I thought, this is companionship. You know, even if it's distant, we can ask anything, and it's just rich and congenial. It's really kind of, and supportive. It was supportive. And I really enjoyed that. Even I never switch off from it, even if I didn't read all of it. I wanted to have it from time to time and just kind of dip in. So that's how the ICG, and then me wanting to get involved. I think I was in the committee for a while. I mean, I can't even remember, to be quite honest, and supported it in all sorts of different ways. I just felt, for me, it's about community overall. You know, it's creating community, I think, is essential.
And quite a few, as I was saying, quite a few members said that you were the main reason that they found out and joined, that you were quite you proselytized on the ICG's part, which is grand. I didn't realise there was a period pre-e-group within the ICG.
Yeah, I think I should have gone into PR. But that's exactly what I'm saying. I discovered over the years, and I never realized it. I think you don't really understand who you are, you know, after you get old, basically. And I'm thinking, oh wow, it's just like, I am a networker, and I just talk about what I think is worthy, you know, what I think, what I believe in, what I have passion for, what I believe is really good for people. And connections for me is essential, especially when you work on your own, and and you can sometimes struggle. There's no need to struggle when there are people to talk to.
Yeah, I can relate to that completely. And so talking about your passion, you then gradually started volunteering or working, or how did you get interested in climate change and environmental issues?
So that was part of the bigger picture, and for me that was more of a spiritual journey that started maybe 15 years ago now, and it was very slowly moving. And I always quote an incident. I think it was 2000, must be 2011, would have been 11 years ago, where I sat outside Disneyland Paris, outside the station, and my client had just gone away and left me in the car. But then I kind of looked at myself thinking, I can't do Mickey anymore. This is eating my soul away. And it was really like a moment of a decision-making moment in a way that things was being decided for me because I knew I couldn't carry on. It was extraordinary business. I did some amazing projects for them and some really horrible ones too, like all about money, and I just couldn't take that world anymore. So that was the beginning. I start slowing down and working less, kind of being more, bringing discernment to what I was doing and how I was doing things. And then I did some vision fasts in the States. I got reconnected to nature in a way that was more visceral and whole, I would say. And that changed. And then I kept reading. I started reading, and I went into that kind of eco depression that a lot of people go to at some point, maybe 7-8 years ago now, where I was utterly depressed by the state of the world when I understood what it was. And I did what I could, but I knew it wasn't enough. So that's hence the residual dissatisfaction or restlessness, I would say. And every time I moved away from research, I would get tested. So I remember going to Findhorn for, there was a New Year, and coming down on the train and getting this big email from Nestle, this huge project for Nestle, it's all on bottled water. And I kind of thinking, yeah, can't work on this really, you know. So, and it's just taking those little steps one by one, which took me years, literally, as a transition. And I can't say I could have sped it up in any way, because I couldn't really. I mean, I was a single mum, all my income relied on what I did or not, I didn't do, you know, so like that was a matter of, I guess I needed to be careful, but then I decided not to be. This is where the change came. So when Extinction Rebellion came, I did something else before. I helped launch a film, which was completely different from me, that took me away from research for a bit, but it was always part-time. It was always, and then in the choice of jobs, I always ask myself, is this project going to help protect and repair the planet? So I have a loyal client who just does DIY. It's always about repairing and mending, which was absolutely perfect, you know. And so until last year, you know, it's been a regular client, and I still do work, and I don't want to do analysis anymore. I just want to do the performative part. So it's the marketing stuff that I don't want to touch anymore. It feels, ooh.
Yes.
You know, I'm sorry, it's just a reality for me now. That's really hit hard. And when it did, then I helped launch that film, which was all about Indigenous wisdom and reconnection to nature. It was all kind of a context for it. And when Extinction Rebellion came about, I couldn't join them in October because of the involvement in the launch of that film. But I started bringing dialogue in cinemas because of it. So all the moderation, all the tools, all the training I invested in myself over the years in terms of dialogue, in terms of innovation, creative thinking, well, everything I did then made sense to me. Because I saw Extinction Rebellion doing people's assemblies in the streets, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're doing dialogue with anyone in the street, which for me was the ultimate, the most challenging thing. I can do it with the board of Disneyland Paris. I could sit them in the circle and run it, because the professionals follow rules. When you get anyone coming from the street, it's a complete different challenge. So I knew where my future was. There was no question about it. So I guess I'd never been an activist until I joined Extinction Rebellion. That's the truth, you know. Yeah.
Fascinating. And so gradually you, over the years, the kind of clarity that you got kind of came to a head. I love the idea of sitting outside Paris Disneyland and sort of thinking, I can't do this anymore. There are moments like that, aren't there? And so I guess where are you now? What's your life like now?
So it's been really interesting. It's been 3.5 years with Extinction Rebellion, literally full time. I used my savings for the first 3 years, I would say. I claimed expenses, travel expenses. People had, you know, it was quite well known that they had money, but, you know, other people needed the money. And what I did is I sat all the gifts of organizational understanding. So we use a holocratic system, self-organized system, which you can only read in books. It was an extraordinary experience for me to be part of this and to see how it failed and how it succeeded. And I created a subgroup within political circles. So I've been involved in fields and realms that I never thought. I wasn't even interested in politics. So I remember sitting in a political circle for 2 months and thinking, why am I here? I don't even understand what they're talking about. I'm not interested in the people they're talking about. And then I heard that we weren't influencing the conservative field, and it was all about people and motivations and psychology. And I thought, oh, that's my field. Oh, maybe I can help with that. So I created a subgroup called XR Catalyzers, and they've been going strong for 3.5 years. I'm still running conversations, and I'm still being asked to run fire circles, as I've called them. So I've created this new way of bringing people together, which we've offered to people in places of power and influence. So the mandate of XR Catalyzers has been to bring dialogue to people in places of power and influence. And of course, I got involved with People's Assembly. So I've been running large-scale assemblies in Greenwich. I think we had 175 people in Greenwich. Trafalgar Square, 1,200 people. We had 120 note takers. It was just extraordinary, and all emergent. Very little planning. This is what I've learned: is the power of the people, and the self-organized nature of goodwill, and be all sharing the same cause, although we're all completely different. That we would never choose to be together if we were to choose it, because we are so different. That's the reality, and that was the gift, I think, of Extinction Rebellion in that way. So I've been involved everywhere in strategy, political well-being. I started as police liaison as well. I was thrown into the deep end from the start. I was actually the one being served Section 14 by the police on Parliament Square in the first week of April Rebellion, April 19. I didn't even know what Section 14 was. The guy, the blue bib, as we call him, gave me a copy. So I could read, thinking, oh, damn, I'm responsible. I'm the contact. And then we saw 150 policemen marching onto the square, which is, and I couldn't get arrested because I wasn't arrestable at the time. Right. It was just traumatic, actually, absolutely traumatic. So it's counterbalancing the gifts of running assemblies on Parliament Square, running assemblies in very public places. We've been invited to I mean, I run one at the House of Commons in October 19, which not many people know, with peers and MPs. Yeah, it's been an extraordinary journey, and I've ended up talking to people. I've got a meeting with someone from the House of Lords in 3 weeks' time. I'm talking to people who just left the cabinet. So it seems, yeah, it's no strategy, nothing of the old world. That it's all emergent. It's all about going with the energy, and people saying, oh, you should be talking to XR Catalyzers. They're doing some interesting work. It's all voluntary. There's no money involved. And there's some very specific factors that make us successful, or I would say effective. Yeah.
That sounds fascinating, and I kind of I can see, as a researcher, we learn not to be scared of a lack of structure, and not to stress or fidget about having everything organized. Anything? Do you still do the odd bit of freelance, or do you still?
Oh yeah, so I do. What's happened, because I did need work as part of my process, as I call it, deep adaptation process. When you understand the situation of the catastrophe that we're in right now, then you can do nothing, like most people do still, like Boris Johnson does, or you take action. And I sold my house and I moved to the Isle of Wight, and I've got a garden, so I'm growing food. I'm retrofitting the place. So I did need money to survive. I did need money, and one of the CEOs who attended a number of my fire circles over the last 2 years became a friend. We kind of checked in, and she kind of downloaded at times and wrote to us, a couple of us, saying, thank you so much for fire circles. We've created what we've called the Art of Forests, which is an alliance of all the major organizations involved in reforestation and ecosystem restoration. And then I chatted to her before Christmas, and she said, oh, I really want you to come and join. We really need someone like you to activate the community. So worldwide community goes from New Zealand to Hawaii via Peru. I mean, it's just incredible. And so I've been experimenting with this for the last, I work 2 days a week. it pays, helps financially, but it is absolutely extraordinary work. It rebalances the doom and gloom of environmentalism.
Yes.
And it gives me a lot of hope and positivity about the world, knowing that we're looking at 25 billion trees to be planted. We've already got one, and this is where we're at, right, already, with all the organizations involved. I think we've got 120 members, roughly. And that's been a way of, so I am open to, I think I'm very picky. Even if I'm hungry, I would say I will not work on anything that is going to damage the planet. And most marketing projects do. And that's a reality, really. If we are, and that moment in front of Disneyland Paris, I say we have many of those moments. It's just whether we listen to it or not and act on it. And there was a place in my life where I had to act on it. It was just, I was really deeply listening to it, and I wouldn't be honoring who I am. And I see myself, as soon as I start with working with Extinction Rebellion, I fulfilled my purpose for the first time. I was on purpose as an individual for the first time in my life. And I could have never said that. I've done some extraordinary things, throughout my life. I'm very rich and exciting, I would say, from the outside world, but it wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't good. I'd say whatever good that means for you, but it's and I feel I have a clean heart now, and to me that was really important.
It's a lovely way of encapsulating it. You can see that it's a spiritual kind of thing rather than a rational sort of decision. It's much more fundamental than that. Caroline, for those who would like to follow what you're doing and contribute or become more involved, what advice would you give members? Where would you point them?
So there is I guess I don't. For me, it's very difficult to answer because we're not generating funds yet. Donations are always helpful, and people have mixed feelings about Extinction Rebellion as the name. They don't understand what we've been doing behind the scene, for instance. They don't know. But I do think that protest, especially the way it's being censored now, is essential. Is really important. And talking, I think, all I would say is, I would challenge people to actually start telling the truth to themselves and acting on it, because it's not about climate, it's about each of us and how we keep consuming and using above what the earth can provide us with, at the expense of many people in the global south who are now dying, literally. People are dying of heat. People there are articles now that telling you what we've been saying as Extinction Rebellion 3 years ago, that our body cannot withstand certain heats. So we will die, we will literally perish. The earth will survive. It's not an issue. It's not about saving the planet, it's about saving ourselves. So for me, I have a website. I still work as a coach as well, by the way.
Right.
Do lots of other things. So it's Extinction Rebellion. There's Excel catalyzers. I'd be quite happy to send you a Google link to more of the work that we do.
That would be brilliant.
With contact details as well, if people want to get involved, because we're always looking for support. And I am taking a step back. I'm really looking at only what's essential now, because I'm trying to be more impactful in terms of more. There's so much you can do. There's so many people you can talk to, but it's not. It's a bit more because we have run out of time. So it's about saving whatever we've got. We can save at this stage for our children, not even our grandchildren at this stage. And this is the drama of this story. It's like, it's living with this makes you realize that you have to make different choices. I talk to people about the legacy, how they want to be remembered, because these people in power, it's quite important to them. And I don't want to be remembered. I just want people to remember it. And my grandchild, if I ever have grandchildren, to say, oh, Granny did as much as she could whenever she could. That's all I want to be remembered as, personally. And I'm
not sure I'd put an all in that sentence. That is quite significant, being able to say Gran did everything that she could have.
And I would suggest that to all members. And I know it's the end of marketing as we know it, However, there are many skills that can be transferred to what the world needs next. This is where, and research is very important, essential, but it doesn't need to be about profit and a lifestyle that is unbearable, unsustainable. You know, we all know that researchers work in ways that are not acceptable. You know, it really isn't. And I know it's our choice because we're independent, but everyone pays the price, you know. And I think that it starts there for me personally. It starts like, how am I living? Is it really worthwhile? Do I really need all this money? Because it's lucrative too, you know. Is it, you know, well spent? I don't know. It's reassessing the world in the way our own world as researchers and marketeers. In terms of its worthiness.
That leaves us with some really interesting questions to ask ourselves, Caroline. Thank you so much for your time. I'm just going to